Professor Guido Preparata, University of Washington at Tacoma, will review and analyze several of the monetary ideas of Silvio Gesell, who was a German reformer in the early 1900s who tried to find ways to abolish usury. So, Guido, are you ready?
Yes, I am. Can I do it from here?
You certainly can. You want this mic?
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you. This is a lecture. It's this talk that I have been promoting across my perambulations, my perambulation across the world, and this was in the Middle East, and it was just the last of this fantastic sequence of fiascos. And the idea was that I went there with this Fulbright grant to study political Islam and Islamic finance, and to see also what was the story about this presumed clash of civilizations and all the garbage that we've been exposed to and so on. And so I thought that I go to the Middle East with under this cover of promoting money reform and speaking to the Muslim scholars and get a taste of that world and figuring out the truth. All right, so I just believe that in this big project of monetary reform, there's these ideas of this clan of anarchists, of German anarchists in the early 1900s that had one in particular, one of their gurus by the name of Silvio Gesell, who's known to a few. I discovered him by way of Ezra Pound, so we already are on kind of shaky ground, and but fantastic poet, and so. I just discovered these things and decided there was something to it that explains a lot of things, and I just reorganized ideas around this intuition of this German, and it has to do with the notion of free money. How do you abolish interest? And it's related to everything, I think, not just to reform, but how to push through change in this world, which we agreed, and I've listened for the first time in my life in this group, that we all agree that we live in a world that is pornographic, deeply obscene. And how do we change it in a world in which words such as compassionate become difficult or radical, controversial terms and things like that? So I proposed this thing. I just did give this talk in two different schools, University of Amman, all of them Muslim, of course, in both schools. The other one was University of Yarmouk, and one that were moderate people, so that's one of these words that we use, which we use with lust these days. And the other ones were these strong Islamists, and there it turned into a complete disaster. It was fantastic in a sense. Now, that by the end of the talk there was this scholar who received me, and he looked at me and he says, "You might not know me, but I'm known." And he translated this thing in Arabic, and then it just rose into this kind of acrimony. And then the women that were shoved in the back, all veiled, started to squeal. That was the signal that everything was just precipitating. And it just gave me orange juice and then shoved me out of the department. So here it is. Free money. The question for me is there a way of destroying interest and creating a wholesome means of monetary management that can wade us over into a system of cooperation and peace, which nowadays is really hard to achieve? And I think there is, although it's at an experimental stage, but I think it's a point of principle and a matter of theory upon which we have to agree. It is absolutely essential. So here's the story. So this is a story I told the Arab Muslims, the scholars, and so on. And it's pretty much all the same story, but I spiced it up with these references to the Quran. But you recognize this, the gist is pretty universal, of course. We know that monotheism fulminates against interest. The Arabs call it al-riba. Quran, and I don't remember if it's Quran or the Hadith or the Sunnah altogether, mentioned about I think it's the Sunnah as a whole, mentions 73 types of this loan with interest, and it is targeted as the root of all evil. And amongst the sacred texts, the Quran, even though it doesn't say why it's so bad, is the only one that centers this thing head on, that it's bad. But of course there's confusion. Why is it bad and so on? It's the origin of this thing. So root of all evil, and I think that economically it's the problem of all problems. It is the most important. It's just the way it is. Monetary, and the monetary matter, it's the central one. Once you've got this down, then you can move on. Until the problem of the idea of money is not clear in one's mind, it's going to be hard. So, question of course, what is al-riba, the origin? And there is no agreement whatsoever. And so I think that I believe that Gesell is the only one who furnished a theoretical beginning which we must pursue. In Islamic jurisprudence, it is identified in two rubrics. Riba al-nasiya, it is mentioned as a loan, so it's a debt with a deferment. You give me money and then I return it to you a certain amount of time hence. And the other one is riba al-fadl, which mentions specifically the commodity aspect of it. Gold for gold, plus a surplus, plus something else. The famous X. It might be gold, might be silver, might be dates, whatever. So from these two rubrics we get the two fundamental traits of this problematic issue, namely time and gold, which are, it's like a mystery. And so here are the clues. Time is involved in gold as well. And the idea is that finally Gesell derived, the big question that there is what enables the money owner to charge interest? And the key, the answer to that question is in these two traits of the problem. And time is of course one, and the physical property of gold. Gesell, who was a German businessman in dental implements, made a fortune. He was one of those Germans that was going back and forth with Argentina, so he knew the ways of business and then figured it out. Interest, where does it come from? A lot of people say, well, there's interest because there is some kind of this uncertainty as to repayment. And Gesell says, no, that is factored in. That's the insurance component of it. But even when you are perfectly solvent and your word is as solid as oak, as the notion of prime interest conveys, prime interest conveys, you're charged interest no matter what. There's a hard core of usury. And Gesell says, where? Why? And this is what we have to understand. He says the truth of this is in its historical and institutional adventure of the metal, which was always involved into these transactions. The gold is the one thing that never dies. And there's the key, there's the answer. It never dies. All other commodities do. Everything is perishable. We certainly die. But there's this one thing which never does. And the abomination of all abomination is that it has been brought into the economic exchange as the medium amongst things that perish, when this thing is the only thing that doesn't. That is where the problem begins. And sure enough, banking began by hoarding this particular commodity. Obviously. It's very simple. So, Gesell says there is a fundamental imbalance from a macroeconomic standpoint in the world of production. On the one hand, there's the party of those who can wait. This is the sector of the bankers, those who have cornered the gold hoard. And on the other side, there's all those the producers. And those are in control of perishable goods. They cannot afford to wait. These can afford to wait forever. So from this embarrassment, calls it Gesell, from this profound microeconomic or from economic imbalance comes the nature of this tribute. The tribute is a toll, a fee. It is the interest, or what the Muslims call al-riba. Along with the notion of a tribute, or the Hebrews call neshek, bite. I like the idea of this. You tear the flesh of something, and you need to have also, corresponding with that, a notion of a just price. We all know, even if you don't have any kind of sophisticated measurements, but we know when we've been ripped off, we know the value of things. And the notion of just price is so important. We feel that the interest is a bite off, which should have been a just remuneration. Question of the just price, we want to get into that, but I generally follow the definition of, I think, of a great mind, is the Austrian mystic Rudolf Steiner. And he says a just price is that price And it's first simple, rough and ready definition. It's that price that guarantees sustenance and to the artisan, and enough provisions to enable him to produce for the second cycle. This and so everything is in this. So it is by law what we call a minimum price, although minimum wage has some kind of a feeling of dejection and last resort desperation. It's more than that. It's that remuneration which by law just proclaims the dignity of people. There's a level below which you should never go. It's in the laws of Plato, and we all remember that. So it is recognized that interest is a terrible thing. It's a weapon of war. We remember these the thunderings of the Deuteronomy, and not an interest at your brother, and not to other nations, and so on. It is an implement of war, violence, and even in the Muslim tradition, apparently there is this story that in war it was allowed to charge interest to your opponent. So it is associated with the brutality of strife. Oh, I'm on the way. Forgive me. What is really interesting at this point, once we understand that, is what Gesell does is that he founds the problem. He finds the anchor. This is the seed. And once we understand the problem of money, you understand that it's also creating a rent-generating process. Once everybody is in debt, then everybody will try to foist a difficult condition which he has suffered at the hands of the banker upon everybody else. And you understand why businesses have to struggle, because they have overhead. Why cities have their cops on their speed traps, so they reduce parking space, because they want to give you tickets. Well, why? Because there's not enough taxes to pay the interest, because they're indebted too, and so on and so forth. It's like a curse that begins at that point and spreads down all over the system. So, of course, you attack the problem by attacking the head of it. But we'll come, and I hope we'll have just a brief discussion. How do you attack? This is a powerful enemy, and my feeling is that we are underestimating the institution that harbors these powers of imperishability that hide behind the network, the proprietary network of the banking system. So, business routines, very simple to understand. How do you understand a business routine? Well, you just figure out what overhead is. This example is silly, it's not even right, but if it was written at a time where prime interest was 4.5% and you're perfectly solvent, survival for you is to cover at least that. Not even break even is not even good enough. So we'll just say you've got to be above 5, or else you go on for 2 months and the bank says enough, you fold. Very simple. So fundamental identity in the world of business is this. There's this, what we call rate the rate of return, or the interest upon capital, or profit. Profitability is basically driven by interest. You stand above it, you survive. You go below it, you lose. Who determines the interest? The banking system. No doubt about that. And hence, all these things this rent-generating process, these things that Gesell had understood, and is my contention that all these things have been copied by John Maynard Keynes and twisted out of context in ways that are very strange, and that so-called classic of his general theory in 1936. There's a treatment of Gesell, very nebulous, in that loony bin of the cranks in the 23rd chapter, I think, if I remember correctly. But anyway, that's another long story, but let's stick to this. So, the rent-generating process and so on and so forth, so copyrights, and everybody tried to escape these rights and these enclosures. This is what it's about. Bankers have enclosed this powerful commodity which they use as a means of payment, and everybody does the same. You enclose and you rip off, you overcharge. Hence the copyrights and all these things, rents, quasi-rents, and everybody is trying to escape them. Hence this constant preoccupation with pirating and so on and so forth. It is the people and the people and the producers that are rebelling against the system of institutionalized privilege, as I call it, a proprietary network which begins with money. Stuff that we all agree upon, which is very good. We don't have to lose time in explanation or avoid the tomatoes from the audiences, as sometimes happens in my classes and things like that. a very, very open-minded instructor. I allow the kids to speak their minds. Now, so there are, and as I've heard in other discussions, many of you have pointed out beautifully, what we know that our system is a system that is plagued by two contrasting forces. There is this constant deflationary effect that you have got to curtail production to keep the prices up. The enclosure movement, spawned by that initial charging of interest, which is deflationary, so it just tends to keep prices down, and of course the rest, and a variety of people unemployed. But then there's the constant inflationary thing that you've got to inject and to lubricate this machine because the bankers need their rents. And the absentee owners and the income, all that stream of incomes that people have on their capital, they never want the principal back. As we know, they want to clip the coupons, the unearned income. These fundamental, very simple observation upon which the greatest of all, that is Thorstein Veblen, who has not been mentioned once before, and he should be one of the guiding lights of our movement, wrote his greatest testament, Absentee Ownership. These are books that should change people's lives. And they're 80 years old, but it's our world. Absentee Ownership? Thorstein Veblen? Yeah. So, two forces, inflation and deflation, and that cohabit and keep our system in the state of funny stasis. How do we get out of this thing? And so this was more related to the problems of Islamic finance. As you know, Islamic finance emerged about 30 years ago on the wake of the debacle of the Fourth Arab-Israeli War, and it's accompanying also this resurgence of Islam, which is completely hollow, and a resurgence of desperation more than anything, of having nothing else to cling to, after the Israelis kind of sealed the political conditions in the 70s. Precisely at that time, this movement returned, and it had its counterpart in the financial world, which, by the way, as I read before, and then I came to touch with my own hands, has been entirely redesigned with the help of the great bank cartels of the West. Citigroup, Morgan Chase, and all these other banks went there and designed these contracts to give the impression, allegedly, that the Muslims could have monetary instruments where riba, interest, would not be present. And so they have devised these two contracts. One of them is called murabaha, and this is our way. Some Muslim says, and they're having quite a lot of success there, attracting savings away from the traditional banks because they're guaranteeing this facade of piousness. So this is our way of guaranteeing that you are not sinning against the Quran, because it's a loan that we do interest-free, murabaha. So what do? You need a car? Okay, we, the bank, are going to buy the car for you. So we're going to have an office where we just buy stuff, and then we're going to give you the car and charge a little interest for our intermediation. And I looked at the Muslims at the Yarmouk University, and I told you, this is interest this big. And they said, well, no, it's not. It's because we are guaranteeing. I said, yeah, whatever, this is interest. So, and so then they have another one, which is called mudaraba, silent partnerships. It's dividing profits and losses together, and this is workable. We can do this, and I think this is, so not all of it is bad. I mean, and this is taken from certain traditions of that world, which is business inclined, and it looked forwards to understanding or managing financial transaction as partnerships, and also a contract like this, what it implies would be an end to all of this speculative movements. And once you commit to an investment, as is done in a variety of wholesome investment situations, you are bound to it. As in matrimony, you cannot just get rid of it when it doesn't look good anymore. You've got to follow it as an investor. And mudaraba kind of mimics that. And so my way of navigating these funny waters was to say to them, murabaha, not at all, but mudaraba, okay. And so some of them were fine with that. But anyway, it doesn't interest us that much. Let's see what, we still hope that the Muslims will follow, but my sense of what the Middle East is doing was a talk that I had with an American trained economist in Cairo, and he looked at me and he says, this sounds nice, but you know what, if the Americans do it, well, we'll just follow. And I said, okay, that just gives you an idea of how projected forward you are. All right, now, this is, what was the response of Gesell in all of this? How do you solve the number one conundrum? Well, if everything dies, yes, and money is the only thing that doesn't die, you don't make the mistake of Proudhon, who was a good man. He was the anarchistic father, in a sense, spiritual father of Gesell, of trying to make money, try to use the commodities as money. No, what you do is you try to make the token mimic the nature of the goods themselves. You create certificates with an expiration date. You make the money reflect, you put it in sync with the goods, and this is a clause, this is a mechanism inserted into the money that allows it to be synchronized to the goods and prevents it from being hoarded. Because the money is out there representing goods in the warehouses that need to be consumed. And you cannot afford to hoard it because then stuff goes to seed and the process is interrupted. But if you insert this clause, which isn't a clause or a cavil, you are inserting a natural element which the token reflects the life of the goods that it accompanies. So, how do we do this? This is a project modernizing a bit the idea of Gesell. When in the 1910s, when Gesell and other Germans, another one was Steiner, was an anarchist of sorts but belonging to a different kind of environment, proposed was they wanted to have certificates. Gesell wanted to have a particular kind of certificates, and I'll show you a picture where you affix stamps on each week, stamps that you would buy from a central office. Now the question is from which office is important, and as a tax, negative tax on money, and to make it circulate. So if you keep it, put it under the mattress, it loses value. Steiner instead proposed to have these certificates with an expiration date, and when you wanted to renew them, you'd pay a user fee of 5%, which is a negative tax on money, which is against a disincentive against hoarding. What we propose, what would be nice to have. So, of course, my view, I very much support regional currencies, which is not to say that I don't agree at all with the project of nationalizing the Fed. I think it's the exact same project. But I would like to see it. I think it has more chances, which are very slim, of succeeding if we start small. But it doesn't mean that the two battles are not they are for the same. They're waged for the same aims, and they should be waged together. So. What was the project? Here, the example I used was an XD in Jordan, where I was stationed. They had Jordan dinars, the JD, and I said, why don't we just introduce in the neighborhoods that are plagued by unemployment? Some of them was as high as 20-30% officially, which means much higher than that. Let's introduce these XDs. In order to have these XDs, they should be printed from communal mints, where the three sectors of the economy are represented. You could have the sphere of the rights, the arts and sciences, and the economic sector, of course. The people who manage the economics have to be there to tell you what to do. And so how do you manage this? Well, with certificates, you cannot understand it. So there are a number of questions. And how would you do it in an electronic system? Well, my idea is really simple. Everybody has a checking and savings account. On the checking account, there is on real time a negative tax of 5%, which you lose it, which reflects decay, and this goes, and it shouldn't be much, 5% per year. It's actually even high. It can be less than that. This is an average rate of depreciation that has to be estimated by economists. They take a basket of representative goods and see what is an average rate of depreciation from butter lettuce to buildings, and it's come up with an average. It doesn't have to be too high, or else you are hampering commerce. And that is a negative tax, and you can use that as expenses, a way of defraying expenses for running the banking system. But on the savings account, this is the key question everybody asks, is, well, how do I save for my future, my retirement, with these ridiculous certificates of yours, with these expiration dates? Well, you have to understand that saving is the act of saving, as it is traditionally thought in econ classes, is not real. You don't stuff money under your pillow and then in 15 years you go to Yale. That's not the way it works. The way it works is that it is consumption that you are deferring. But the goods are there every year and they need to be consumed. And so what do you do if you don't want to consume them just yet? You shift whatever you receive on your check into your savings, and you entrust this money, which may grow, it may be even a lot of money if you work hard, to the banker. And now the banker ceases to have his ugly face and could be a useful entrepreneur in taking hold of this of these savings, which represents, these are all tokens to goods that are in the warehouse that need to be consumed now, and to invest them, to give them to others who start to build houses. And what he does is that he guarantees to the owner of the accounts that this sum will remain every year the same. He is fighting depreciation on the saver's stead. This is why we have negative interest on checking, 0% on savings. So fighting depreciation on behalf of the saver. So this is entrepreneurship by right. All right, so what this would do, of course, it would liberate a tremendous amount of energy, would put people back to work. It would lead to an enormous amount of production of infrastructures and so on and so forth. And you know, it's a virtuous cycle. Let me show you some of these schools in Germany. In Germany, there is a movement that is very fragmented, and it's the usual problems of small groups of reform. They are divided by differences in vision, rivalry at times. But anyway, the two different ways of doing this. Here is this school that is the Waldorf schools that are inspired by Rudolf Steiner. Of course, what they do, these girls from a school decided to issue these certificates, which leave the school. It's interesting. They start at the last link of the economic cycle, the arts and sciences, when Steiner said that in fact the best way to start is by issuing these certificates, by starting with the agricultural sector. But anyway, and then they print these little stamps which they sell, and one affix these stamps on the certificates to make them circulate. This is here's the Chiemgauer from the city of Chiemgau, and the other form of the other form of certificates. Here's the original. This is an original Gesellian scheme that was tried in 1932 with at the height of the crisis in Austria. There were two experiments, 31 and 32, in Germany and Austria respectively. And here are the months. And this was done in a country in a city that had a mine. So you have to have a pool of wealth to play these games. Here were the places where the stamps would be affixed. And of course, the scheme was interrupted when this certificate reached the offices of the district office of the central bank. Thank you, I'm done already. And here is instead, the city of Gießen has issued a Rudolf Steiner sort of certificate, which is called a Justus. And instead of having the stamp being affixed into these boxes, this is a simple certificate. Here is the expiration date, December 31st, 2005, and then they would be clipped when they would be taken. These are issued by businessmen who have stock, and against 1% of their stock have issued these certificates as a matter of economic survival when the banks have not been sanguine. And so I'm not particularly fond of having businesses run the whole thing, but this is to give you an idea of the kind of emergency devices that are being thought about in times of deflation. And what this does, of course, is it attempts to duplicate the banking grid, although it's a complicated and very long process. But attempts are being made. So I would like to conclude the final note that I have. I would like to see your movement, the movement promoted by Steven Zarlinga, and all of these other things merging into one general thing, so that we can gain mass. Because like this, it's just not enough. The enemy is far too fat, and so I just hope this merger will take place soon. Thank you much.
I'm interested how you would respond to my question about the changes in the financial institutions in Iraq since the Bremer 101 reforms that allowed U.S. banks to take over the financial institutions there. Is this being reported or monitored, or what are your observations about that?
I don't know what happened ever since. The only thing I know, the only thing I remember is that they canceled all the debts. They canceled all the debts that Iraq had vis-a-vis, I guess, the Gulf states, which is what they didn't do when Germany lost World War I. Well, it was a different situation. Germany was not beholden to others, but there was a huge war debt. It was very important. And so the fact that they annulled all that debt clearly gave you the direct signal that they were about to take over the entire machine. But then I guess all the mess that has followed and the complete failure of the occupation has slowed that thing down very much. As to exactly what they did, I don't know at this stage.
There should be $200 million of reparations to the U.S.
To the U.S. from whom? From Iraq? Oh, Iraq? They still owe 200 million?
Yes.
Well, I thought they had annulled whatever debts. Well, maybe it was against the Gulf War. Well, I don't know. I don't know. How they will do this? Well, since they're taking over the central bank, the money they're going to pay to themselves by way of oil exports. I don't know. That's a good question. I just don't know.
This was a pretty complex subject. I'm still having trouble thinking about it. But what happens when you're old and you can't produce anymore and you need to save your money and your money's decaying?
And your money's not decaying. As I said, you put it into savings. And in the savings, the guarantee that you have is that the bank will keep that money at face value. Because if there weren't somebody to do that, you've accumulated all this money. Your money would just your wealth would just run to nothing, right?
Okay. Is there any consideration of possibly putting a limit, like on the decay of something in an account that's twice the median income or something like that, where you aren't penalizing people who have meager savings, but you are decaying the larger money supplies, people with accounts in the millions, and that would be more beneficial in that respect.
I'm sorry, I don't understand the question.
Well, instead of decaying all the money, could you just decay certain money supplies that are over a larger sum? Something that's like 3 times the median average. So if it's worth 36,000, it counts over 112,000 or something like that.
No, I guess the way I would look at this is when you save money and you say you have $1,000, you keep 100 in your checking account for current expenses and 900 you save. And the bank with those 900 bucks correspond to food and materials. So they've got to do something with it. What you're telling your bank by saving them is that you don't need them just now. You might need them in the future. So what the bank does is that it gives them to somebody else to build, say, a house or a car or something else. You don't know. You might, and it depends on whatever agreement you have. If you need the money in a year, then you're going to have that money channeled into a 1-year investment, and then you can liquidate it and buy it. It's just as you do it now. But instead of having a positive charge on checking, well, if you do have one, we don't, but in Europe we do, they do. But now it's as if having a negative charge on checking and 0% on savings. And how do you reach 0%? Well, with tremendous flourishing of production. Then you drive the rate upon capital slowly to 0 because there'd be no shortage of housing or anything else.
With in a complex economy, who and how determines the time limit on certificates? I mean, how do you factor that in? Because you're not, you're just not building a bridge here or a highway there. You're doing millions of transactions per day.
Sure. Well, I mean, yeah, of course. We produce, we save, and then the money flows back into these banks, and then there's taxation, there's donations, and so on and so forth. And on the basis of that, you decide what to do with your money. I mean, if there is tremendous savings, then there can be enormous donations, and this is how you start to build bridges.
No, that's not my question.
You want to know about how long the certificate should, the expiration date?
Right.
All these things we have to experiment. Now, what the Germans have proposed is to have certificates of 1 year as a consumption cycle, and that works for petty transactions, and everything that doesn't fall within that falls into the realm of savings, which becomes entrepreneurship of the banks for the investment, which is a world of its own. We may agree, you may say, well, why don't we have 6 months, or 3 months, or 2 years? I don't know. Maybe we should. Depends. Let's just start and see if it works.
Great, just a comment, great presentation. Our means of exchange is failing with bank money, and we have a process of extracting wealth, and so in the process we're losing our means of exchange. And many people don't have a way to tie their labors into a constructive means of change, and I think your idea to have a constructive means of change as opposed to the extraction of wealth may be very important moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you much.
You all hang in there now because we're going to have a nice coffee break. In fact, why don't you stand up now if you want, and just stretch for a little bit, and then we'll sit down and we're going to introduce this fine gentleman.